my machine just went to sleep. Wake it back up. Good morning. We'll wait for people to show up. Get some notifications. Come on over. We'll do Sew Together Tuesday. It's always like this fun little thing. We're waiting. Are you out there? Okay, good, good. We'll get some people. Just has to show up. Hi. Just takes a little bit. Technology, it's a thing. Welcome to Sew Together Tuesday. I'm Teresa Coates. I'm the National Educator for Shannon Fabrics, and it's actually Wednesday, but we're doing Sew Together Tuesday Part 2. This week we are making a robe, and so we did a whole bunch of stuff yesterday, and we're just going to keep on working, and then at the end I'll have a bunch of information on making the robe out of terry cloth and out of embrace, so working with those two fabrics other than the Luxe Cuddle, but this morning we're just going to finish this robe up. So yesterday in part 1 we did the first part of the robe, and this is the Classic Kimono. So let me show you the pattern really fast. So this is the Classic Kimono from Indygo Junction. Okay, super easy little pattern, just a few pieces, simple construction. We had a few things that were a little bit different because it's Luxe Cuddle, but for the most part I followed the pattern pretty simply. Okay, so yesterday we got the body put together, the front, the back, the sleeves. We did the sleeve band, and today we're going to finish it up. So today we'll put the whole front band on, and then we'll deal with the hem and the belt. Okay, please leave your I always say that. Leave your city and state. Tell us your favorite quilt shop. And we'll enter you to win a gift package that's basically the pattern and the fabric to make your own robe just like this. So I'm excited to be here. Again, we'll finish this up. Also, there was something I needed to tell you guys. Oh, shoot. Okay, I'm going to remember. It just totally disappeared. All right. It'll come back. That's the way these things happen. So the robe, we got those parts finished. What we're going to do is the band first. Okay, so that's where I want to go next, is putting on the top band. So what I'm going to do, oh, and if you have any questions, please just leave them in the comments, and Hawk will pass them on if he needs to. Otherwise, lots of people pop in and answer questions, which is great. So thanks to all the brand ambassadors and our little team that's out there. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm going to fold this in half to find the middle. Okay, so I've folded it so that my fronts match here, and here is my center. So I'm going to get a pin, and I'm going to stick it right down that little fold. Okay, so there's my center. That's my center back. All right, if I wanted to, you could put like your little tag in here if you have one of those, or just put like the little P.S. I love you tags, or nothing at all. Okay, so then I have my center, and then I need to find the center of my band. So the band it calls for, this is kind of a funky part, is the band calls for the different sizes. It calls for a 6-inch strip. So it's one of the nice things about it is that the front band, the sleeve bands, and the belt are all 6-inch strips that are then folded in half, stitched, and stitched on. So it's pretty easy to remember how wide they are. The band varies depending on how big your robe is. Okay, so you're going to cut 2 or 3 of those strips depending on how big it is. This one, I have 2 of them. I seamed them together in the middle. Okay, so I've got 2 strips that are sewn together. And then what I did, we talked a little bit about serging yesterday, is I serged one edge, and then I folded this in half, and then I zigzagged it down one side. So right now it's folded in half, both right sides. Okay, so my wrong side is in there so that I can sew this on. The way that it is sewn in the pattern is that it has you do it flat as a 6-inch piece that you'll come around, and I'll show you on the terry cloth how I did that. I just prefer doing this because it's easier to put all of these together raw edges, and I'll explain a little bit more when I do the terry cloth and why it's a little bit difficult to do that way. So this way, the biggest issue is that you'll end up with your raw edges showing here. So if you wanted to serge those, you can, and I have a sample I'll show you later of what the serging looks like. You're also welcome to just leave it a raw edge. Otherwise, the other way, it does hide those edges, but it's definitely more difficult to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pin this along here. Okay, and I'm going to be careful because if you remember yesterday, this one's real stretchy. Okay, this one not so much. All right, so I need to be careful that when I'm pinning this, I am not stretching it at all. Okay, the other thing to remember is that it's a knit fabric, so you'll see that my knit around the collar here, how it wants to curl in, and that's because I didn't finish it like the first off, and so it's stretched a little bit as it went, and so that's why it starts to curl, because knit is like that. So it's no big deal. I'm just going to flatten it back out and pin it. Okay. See if I can get that through all the layers. All right, and I'm going to try to flatten this seam because I'd like that to be flat when I come around it, so it's open. Okay, and then I'm just going to come all the way down the edge. Now there are definitely some options on when you're doing this, how you do it. We'll talk about it when we get down to the bottom. But this part, this way is the easiest way of doing it, okay? So it won't be the nicest finish, but it'll be the easiest way. And we'll talk about, I'll show you the nicest finish later. Okay.
We have a really good question
Yeah.
about the pattern in general. Somebody wanted to know, they would the pattern only goes up to X, 2X.
Yes.
What would you recommend to enlarge it?
Okay,
if you wanted to go up to a 3X.
Super easy. Let me show you. We'll totally divert for just a second to show you. Okay, so this is 101 in pattern grading. Okay. So what you're going to do, let me see if I can find the pattern pieces. Here they are. Okay, so zoom on in, Hawk.
Here we go.
Let's do this. So what you're going to want to do, these are your pattern pieces. Okay, this pattern pieces actually comes out like this and then goes straight down. That's the way the pattern piece is actually in there. So I have a feeling that the pattern used to look slightly different. Okay. So this is how the pattern is. So when we were talking yesterday, like if you got a big booty, you're going to want this to be wider. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. The easiest way would be on your pattern. You're going to cut it, and you're going to cut it, and then you're going to spread these apart. Okay, you're going to do the same thing on here and spread that apart. Okay, this is your shoulder seam right here. So this seam and this seam need to be the same length. All right, so these two right here. So if you make this, you want to add, say, 3 inches to it, you could add 1.5 inches here, 1.5 inches here, 1.5 inches on here, and these will be the same size then. Okay, does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, pop in questions and we'll come back and talk with this. But that's how you're going to enlarge this, is on your shoulder seam, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, you can also enlarge it a little bit here. And the more you enlarge it, the more places you need to slowly enlarge it. So like I probably wouldn't do 1.5 inches on each of these. I'd probably do like 3/4, and then 1 inch or something in here or whatever. So you divvy it up. All right. So when you're pattern grading, that's usually the way that it will go. Typically, if you're doing a pattern grading, you would have an arm hole. So this would be like your arm, right? So this is your bodice. Sorry, I'm drawing upside down, guys. And you would slice it here, and you would slice it here, and you would slice it here. Okay. So it's just a matter of like finding places to be able to slide it apart, because you don't want to make it so that your shoulders are ginormous, and you want it so your neck is probably a little bit bigger. But that's how I would do it, is just split that up and make it wider. Okay, don't just take it out from the side. All right, that's just good pattern drafting, is don't just take it out from the side. All right, because you're going to want to expand your shoulders and your neckline. All right, I hope that answered, that helped. That was a lot of information, really fast 101 pattern drafting, but yeah, or grading. But actually, if you learn how to pattern grade, there's a really great article in Threads magazine that is from years ago. I mean, probably 15 years ago, that's about pattern grading. And that was how I learned how to do it. And then I bought more books and learned more. But it's a really good one. So if you buy a pattern and it's a dress pattern and it doesn't quite fit you, you can actually grade it up a little bit. Okay, it's a great skill to have, because not all the patterns are going to fit. Unfortunately, we come in different body. Well, fortunately, we come in different body shapes, and yeah, that would be the easiest way to do with this. Is just expand that a little bit. Okay, and if you wanted to, if you felt like you wanted to make it go out at the bottom and not be straight, you could totally do that too. Okay, this is a simple enough pattern that you could really mess with it and probably not really mess it up. Okay, So what I did is when I cut this, I cut it so it would be too long. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do is get the other length the same amount off the other end. Okay, so I want these, it's basically my way of making sure that I don't stretch it. Okay, or that if I stretch it, I've stretched it the same on both sides. So this is where it's supposed to end on the other side.
That was a marker pin.
Yeah, yeah, just so that these are the same length. I'm going to get these on here, and then I'm going to pin this first. Okay, so now these tails should be the same length because I cut it the same on either side of that seam that I did up there. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm pinning, and then I can go back and I can pin more and get it a little bit pinned a little bit closer. But what I want to do right now is just see if I can get that to fit in all right. Looks like I will. Okay, because if I need to move things around a little bit, I will. I can do that because I know that the two sides of the bodice front are the same size, obviously. So I need to just make sure that this band is the same size as well.
All right, we got a tricky question.
Okay, let's do it.
We're going to go the other way.
Okay.
What happens if you want to make robes for littles?
I would just buy a new pattern.
Okay. All right.
But if you want to make a pattern that like you're narrower, like you're tall and skinny, totally you can do the same thing. You cut those same lines and then you actually just move them on top of each other. Yeah, that's how you grade in and out. It's on those lines. Yeah, but for a kid, I would just buy a kid's pattern. There's a lot of really good ones. There's one, oh gosh, I have to think of the name. My Favorite Things, I think, is what the name of the pattern company is. And they do a kid's pajama and robe pattern that's super cute and easy to do. Okay, so I've got a little bit of extra here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure, and see, it's not even really extra. If I just pull it up, then it's fine. I'm just going to make sure that it's held down there flat. Okay. So I'm going to do the thing that we do with the stuffed animals sometimes and pin on the other side a little bit because this is super fluffy and I can tell it's going to cause me a few little issues. So one of the things also that I'm going to do is I'm going to sew it with the stretchy side down. Okay, so this is the stretchier side. I'm going to sew that on the bottom side so that my feed dogs will work it through a little bit better and so that it doesn't come forward on me. Okay, so sometimes when I'm working with different substrates, a lot of times the thicker one will go on the bottom, and this one is both thicker and stretchier, so it's definitely going to go on the bottom. Okay, so I've got that side pinned. I'll do a couple more up here. Okay, this is, like I said, one of the issues that would come from it being a Luxe Cuddle knit fabric. You could make this out of other knits and you'd probably have to deal with it the same way. But the pattern is originally written for a cotton. So we do things just a little bit different since it's a different substrate. Okay. All right. So when I pinned this side, you saw I pinned it from the other side. So I'll have more pins on the wrong side than this side. This time, I'm going to flip a couple of these around. Just so that they kind of go back and forth and hold this a little bit better. Okay, oops, there's a weird one. Okay, so anywhere it's not laying really nice and flat, is where I'm going to fix it. Okay. All right. So now I've got this done. So one of the things, so this is where things get a little bit funkier because we're going to do it differently. So right now it ends here. I'm going to sew this and I'm going to start up here and I'm going to sew around it and I'm going to leave the bottom inch or so open so we can deal with the bottom hem of this because I have some things that I want to talk about with the hem, which we'll do next, but I'm going to leave that free. What you can, one of the ways that you could do it if you were using, if you knew exactly where you wanted it and you knew how you were doing the hem, what you would do is fold this so that these were right sides together. You'd have a seam in there. Okay, and it'd be like this across the bottom. We're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to do some hand sewing probably, okay, because we want it to be neat at the bottom, but I have some weird things we're going to try for the hem, okay? So bear with me. We'll be okay. Okay. All right, so now we're going to sew. All right, so I'm going to put it on my straight stitch at a 3 stitch length, okay? And like I said, I'm going to start a little bit ahead. So I'm going to get this underneath the machine. Sorry.
Needles, thread.
Yep, 9014 stretch needle. Come on, little guy. There we go. I know, it really is, because this is just so puffy and it has to go underneath the walking foot back there. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to start just a little bit forward, like I said, because I don't want to start it right at the end, because I'm going to have to do some futzing over there. So what I'm going to do when I come over here is I'm going to put 2 pins, okay? And this is my stopping point, so I don't forget and sew to the end, because I don't want to sew to the end. I want to leave it right there. So I got 2 pins in there to remind me of that, okay? And now I'm going to take this nice and slow and go all the way around, all right? So like I said, excuse me, like I said, I'm putting the fluffier one on the bottom, so it'll feed through a little bit better. The fluffier one will want to push more because it's fluffy and stretchy. So it's going to want to shove forward, and then I end up with more at the top that I have to try to feed in. This way the feed dogs will just feed it through evenly, or they should. Okay, make sure we get those pins out, don't run any of them over. So you can see I keep my hand back here, kind of keep it taut as it's coming through the machine. Okay, if your machine is struggling just a little bit, remember you can change the presser foot pressure, okay, and that will help a lot because it'll lift your foot up a little bit so that it's not pushing down quite so hard. All right, the other thing is that you can open up your stitch length. So mine is at a 3, but you could totally do 3.5 or a 4 if it needs to. Okay. And I'm just kind of keeping an eye on those edges, those raw edges, and making sure that they are staying somewhat aligned. Because we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, if it gets a little bit off, it's okay. So that's really one thing that if you go ahead and serge this when you're done, it'll trim that all up and keep it nice and neat. I think I'm going to zigzag it just so we can see how that works, so you guys can see it. I'm losing some pins under there. Can't lose them completely. Okay. So this is where it's starting to curl. I can feel that there's more under here, and you can see I've got the bulk of the robe just over there on the table. So it's going to kind of curl through and just stay up all on the table for me. Okay. Okay. So around this neckline is going to get a little bit funky, and we're just going to take our time with it and make sure we're getting it as even and neatly as possible. Okay. And I'll show you where you're going to have the most hassle. So doing it from this side is actually really nice because I can see all of this. So right here you can see this is going to want to pucker, and if I'm not careful I'm going to get a huge pleat right here, and I don't want to do that. So as I'm working it around, I'm going to have to push this fabric this direction. So I'm going to pull this just a little bit so that I can sort of make it circle around. All right. Okay, so I'm going over, that's nice and thick because that's all the seam allowance there. So it's a lot of cuddle. Okay. Just want to keep an eye on that edge. Make sure I'm getting about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay. I'm going to come around. I'm going to go over this big hump in the middle. So that's also going to be a place where it's really nice and thick because that's where the seam is on my band. Okay, and as I come around here, now I'm going to have to do the same thing here. Get this nice and flat as I go around. All right, so here we go. Get my flat and my seam allowance to open up there. Okay, and you can see I just kind of keep feeling with my fingers to try to see, am I getting any big lumps in there? The Sherpa is interesting because it's so soft and fluffy that even if you you get a pleat, sometimes you can't feel it. So we'll just have to see when we're done how well it did. But I have a better chance of sewing it right from this side than I do from the other side. Okay, so if you're ever struggling with sewing something, you'll want to make sure that you can flip it over. So if it's pushing along and it's too much, just flip it over and sew from the other side. And that's often helpful. Okay, because your feed dogs do a lot of work on this. Okay. Now we get to the straight part. It's a lot of pins. If you wanted to, you could probably pin half of this and clip the other. I just tend to like pins over clips, so they hold it in place much better for me. So, right. Make sure that's flat and that it's staying all up on the table. And then I'm going to get to the end here, do a little back stitch, and leave that little floppy part. Okay, so in the pattern, what she tells you to do is to go down to the bottom, and then you'll flip the whole thing up and and it'll create a hem across the entire thing, including the band, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. All right, let's see. I'm going to flip it so I can see if I caught all of my... See, I feel a pin. Sewed right over one. Okay. That's why we check it too. See if there's any stray pins in there. Okay. Looks like it's pretty good. So the little places where it's caught down in the seams here, I'll come back over this with my stiletto and fluff this up along that edge. Make sure that it's a nice smooth thing because you can see it'll catch differently. Okay. But I think that worked out pretty nicely. I think that looks good. All right. So now we have the hem. And the hem is a little bit crazy. So Hawk and I were talking yesterday about finishing up the hem, and I started brainstorming and figuring out how I wanted to do it because the pockets were short. Oh, and that reminds me, look, I serged the pocket edges, you guys. So I did that last night. So if you saw yesterday, they were loose and open, and then I just serged them yesterday. See how that worked? Worked beautifully. Super nice finish. So I was like, oh, the hem is really short. Like, I'd have to like hem it up. It'll be close to here. And then I was thinking about it, and the hem, I don't particularly love the idea of hemming this because it will leave marks. Let me see if I have. Okay, so this is one that I serged yesterday. Okay, so this is what the serge seam looks like. So I sewed it, and then I serged it. Okay, really nice. So let's pretend that this is my hemline. All right, and I'm going to sew it really fast and show you what happens with this fabric. Okay. So basically you're just here for my brainstorming session of what I was deciding to do. Okay, so I'm going to sew this, and I would sew it from this side so I could see what was happening. Use my little stiletto. Okay. So then when I sew it across, where's my lifter? There we go. What it does is it leaves this hem in it, right? I could see the hem. It does something funky where the seam is. Okay, I don't particularly love this, so that's just personal opinion. You could absolutely hem it like this and it will be okay. You could also hem it like this and then take out your fluff, okay? And it'll kind of go over it, okay? But I realized because it's Luxe Cuddle, so I'm going to try something that I haven't done before, but I think it will totally work. But because it's Luxe Cuddle, it's a knit fabric, it actually could be just left. So the thing that I did is I cut it with a rotary cutter, and so the edge of it is really hard. Okay, so if you see the edge here, it's really hard. Okay, because I just cut it with the rotary cutter. That's not so pretty. So what I'm going to do, which you guys are going to watch and see, we'll see how this works, is I'm going to cut this about probably about a ½ inch up, maybe a little bit more, and I'm just going to cut this all off, and we're going to leave the edge raw. Okay, so we're not going to hem it because it's a Luxe Cuddle. All right, we're going to see how that works. The only issue that I can see that would happen is that it's not going to weigh down. But because it's a Luxe Cuddle, it's already sort of heavy, it's going to fall down. So if it were an embrace, it wouldn't hang right because that hem wouldn't be heavy enough to hold it, but because it's Cuddle, I think it'll be fine. Okay, so we're gonna try it and see what happens. All right, so what I want to do is use a marker. Okay, get my ruler, and I'm gonna mark this just like we always do with Luxe Cuddle. Okay, use my fancy ruler here with the 1/2 inch. So this is when that 1/2 inch comes in really handy. Sometimes it gets in the way and sometimes it's perfect. Right now it's gonna be perfect. Okay. Whoa. So the one thing I am going to want to do before I cut this is I'm going to go back over this and I'm going to strengthen this seam right here. Okay, and I'm going to back stitch this up a little bit further because that seam is going to get some wear now because I'm not going to have a hem there. All right, so I want to just strengthen it up a little bit. Okay, so I'll do that after I mark these. Okay, do they think I'm crazy yet?
Nope.
Okay.
I mean, not about this.
Maybe some other things.
You said earlier that you cut this original hemline was
Yes.
cut with a rotary cutter.
Yes.
What rotary cutter do you recommend? And somebody said that they have 3 different rotary cutters,
Yes.
and it's none of them want to cut the Luxe Cuddle.
You probably should just get a new blade because I don't have any problem when I replace a new blade. So it will. It does need a fresh blade, basically. Like, I'll use the same blade for a while, but like my blade needs to be changed right now. I use an Olfa 45, their ergonomic handle, blah, blah, blah. This one right here. Okay, that's the one that I like. It's the one I use the most. I prefer it, like, for safety wise, I like it a lot. And then I use, I think that's probably an Olfa blade in there. I use the Olfa Endurance blades mostly. Those are the ones I like the best. And they cut really, really well. So yeah, the biggest thing is just kind of taking your time with it. But the rotary cutter will totally cut it. The thing too is I'm not going to cut this with the rotary, but to make sure that you are holding this down really tight when you're cutting with the rotary, because this will want to slide on the back of it really easily. Okay, so you got to really hold it. If you have one of those that you can push down, those are even better. I got this already and now I'm not sure where my blade is. Oh no. I might have to cut it with scissors because I don't know where my blade. Oh, let me try the new fancy one. Let me see if that works. Okay, so this is a new one that Olfa gave me. Let's give it a shot. It's like a safety blade. Oh, look at that, it's gonna work. All right. Okay, so this is one that they sent that has this little safety part on it. So it's a little bit more friendly, not as scary. Okay, and I'm not going to push real hard because I want to make sure that I'm not cutting through my fibers in the front. Okay, so I'm probably going to have to do a little bit of this going back over it. And that's just because I'm being extra careful because I want that nap to stay. So all of this that's hanging down there, that's exactly what I want. Because it's going to hang right over the end. Oh, we forgot to sew that. Let me go sew that. Okay, we're just going to come along here. Okay, and now that I'm up here, I'm going to sew this really fast. So let me do those 2 seams, and I'm just going to reinforce them is all I'm doing. Okay, so that because I'm going to have to cut it off right there when I get up there. Okay, so I just want to make sure that those aren't going to go anywhere. Okay, so there's 1 and 2. Okay, so all I'm doing is sewing over that spot that I sewed before so that when I cut off that bottom part, it's not going to cut off the seam and the seam will loosen up. Okay, should be just fine now. All right, so let's keep going. Now that I got those done, I'm just going to drag this across. There we go. Okay, and like I said, I'm just being extra careful here because I don't. So this right here, I want it to come across. I can see my little black line is a little bit off. So I just sort of fixed it right there. Okay, ta-da, look at that. Right across the seam, we're good. Okay, so the other thing you can do, you could totally fold this up, like I said, and have that seam line in there. The other thing you could do is you could sew like a thin piece of cotton to the bottom and turn that up, and then you could just hand stitch it. You could also hand stitch the cuddle, and then you wouldn't have that little line there either. Okay. A lot of what I do, I really am just trying to figure out, like, how do I get it to look the way that I want it to look. It's interesting. There's definitely like the right way and the wrong way of sewing apparel when you're working with regular apparel fabrics. But with Cuddle, we get to futz with the rules a little bit because it's just different. Okay, but in the end, the product is so great. I kind of like this one. The little blade is nice. Wish I could just see the Olfen name on there. Trying to look and see if I see anything else that's identifying, and I don't, but this is what it looks like. And you can see here's the only part that the blade shows. It's just that teeny tiny. Okay? So, not as easy to cut yourself on accident. So more everyone friendly. I was going to say child friendly, but you know. All right. And it has a cute little stand that it sits into, which is kind of fun. Okay. So some of this is like the little threads that come from the knit fabric, the knit backing, and not the actual nap. Okay. There we go. We're getting there. One more little section. Okay, so now I'm going to go over that seam again. Okay, so I'm coming right along here. Cut my seam, cut my stitches. Scary. Okay, so I'm going to come from this side. Do the same thing. Sorry. The biggest thing here too is when you're using the blade, remember, is to keep some tension on it, and that helps it to come off. Okay, and then you don't have to cut so deep either. So keep pulling it kind of apart and dragging along here. Okay. The other nice thing about Cuddle is if your line isn't perfectly straight, it's going to be okay. Because what you'll see from the front is your Luxe Cuddle. Okay. There we go. So like I said, just one option for hemming, okay? Not the one and only. So if you're like, wait, that is just blasphemy. I totally understand. Okay. All right. Get that last little bit cut. Come on. Okay, and these little strings, when they attach like this, don't yank them too much because they're part of your fabric, and so that's when you get like a little snag in them, so just cut them. Okay? All right. Look at that. It's a hemmed robe. Yay! That was the easiest hem ever. Okay. So I'm going to give it a good little shake. Get rid of, oops, I got a little tail here. Get rid of that. Okay. All right. So now I'll give it a little shake. It's not too bad. Not too bad at all. All right. So now we have a nice edge to the bottom, okay? So what it did is it cut off all of that really hard edge, and now we have a really soft edge. Okay, so that's what that did without having to hem it or anything else. Oops, I cut a little off there. Okay. All right. Now I want to bring my stiletto and I'm going to pull some of this out. Just right here. Get that to fold over a little bit. All right. Perfect. Okay, So I'll give that a good vacuum later. So now we've got the collar and the hem done, right? Okay, so I can't try it on yet. I have to fix what? I have to fix the bottom of it, and then I will hem it. So what I'm going to do here, so there's a couple of different things that we can do. What I think I want to do is I want to cut this off here, and then I'm going to turn this inside and just hand stitch it. You could cut it off and just leave it just like this, but I don't think this is quite as pretty. Okay, so I'll have to hand stitch it maybe after. I might be able to do one of them. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to use this, and I'm going to cut it off with the scissors so I don't accidentally cut off any of these cute little bits here. So I'm going to cut this. There we go. Okay, so now what I can do is take out a little of my stitches right there. At the bottom. I tuck this all in. I'm going to pin it. Okay. Get that there, because then I have to sew this down too. So first I'm going to whip stitch this really fast so you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay, oh no, that means I have to thread a needle. Okay, get some thread out here. Oops, sorry. Come on. Can anybody else see the eye of that needle?
Oh yeah.
Am I getting it? Jeez Louise. Come on, little guy.
Remember how you said your nails weren't perfect this week?
Yeah.
Well, guess what we're showing?
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I decided to take on a little... Oh, I can't thread this needle. It's too small. I might be in trouble, you guys. Also, I decided to do a little woodworking project last night. Forgot that I was going to have to be on camera again today. So, that thread, I think I might have to just say not happening, because I cannot see that eye. You guys can probably see it way better than I can, because I cannot literally see it at all. Can I try to have the light here? Threading a little bitty needle by feel is not really working.
You want to look at my camera? I can zoom way in.
I don't think I'll have the motion. Nope. My thread just keeps bending, and I don't know why it won't just go through the eye. There we go. Okay, sorry guys. Whew, that's a tiny needle. I really prefer like millinery needles because they have like big eyes. Or those self-threading ones. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Really hard to see. Okay.
Ella says Clover makes a needle threader.
They do. It's true. I just don't have one. They are pretty cool, though. I have seen them. They do. Yeah, you just stick it in there and it like just kind of finds it, kind of like your sewing machine does. It's crazy. Okay, so I'm just going to whip stitch this. So it's just going to hold it together. At the bottom, because all we're trying to do is get this to stay together. It doesn't have to look perfect. And weirdly, even when it's not, Cuddle will be like, yeah, it looks great. The joy of it. Okay, make sure I'm getting this right. Okay, so I'm kind of just doing it by feel down there too, to make sure that I'm grabbing actually the fabric. It's really easy when you're doing this sort of thing to accidentally just grab the just the fibers of it, especially with this Cuddle, because this Cuddle is so fluffy. lost it. There it is. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right, there we go. Ta-da! Look at that. It's sewn shut, and you can't even see it. Okay, tack that in there. I'm gonna pull that, give it a good knot, then we'll finish that bottom. Okay, so while we're here, and it's threaded, let's just sew the other bottom. Okay. So I go to the other side, do the same thing. Okay. I'm going to cut this off about the length that those fibers were so that I can pull that under. Okay. Yes, I'm just eyeballing it. Okay. I'm going to pull those stitches out a little bit because I just went over this and zigzagged it after I serged it. So pull that out just a little bit so I can tuck these in. Nice and neat.
Trying to reconnect.
Oh.
That was interesting.
Huh. Sorry if we had a little glitch there, guys. Not sure what happened. Okay. So then I'm going to come back over here, do the same thing. Hide my knot in there, do a little whip stitch. Okay. So just big stitches, just trying to hold it together. Okay, this isn't going to get a whole lot of wear on this this seam, so I don't really worry if my stitches aren't super tight because it's not going to get pulled. I can't imagine a time when that's going to happen, so it should last just fine with some big whip stitches in there. Okay, and because we got so much fluff, if it's not the perfect length, it's going to be fine because it'll hide in there too. Okay. So then, see, look at that. I sewed both of them the amount of time it took me to thread the needle. Okay. All right. And I'll clip that. Okay. So now I'm going to go back over and we're going to sew these down. Okay. So that this is now all the way to the end. All right. So I'm going to do that there. And I'm going to do it over here. Okay, all right, so let's do those real quick. And then I can try it on. Okay. Okay, so that little spot right there, that wasn't too bad, but it might cause you a little bit of issue. The easier way would be to start from this direction, not start at the very edge. And also you can always use your stiletto to help it sort of come along. Okay.
There was a question about your tension on your machine earlier.
Do I futz with it? No,
yes.
I don't do anything to it to change the thread tension. I haven't had to change that at all. It also might be because mine is a higher end machine and kind of fixes the thread tension, but the biggest issue is always of anything I have to change, and I change it on this one as well, is the presser foot pressure, so that how much this comes down onto the fabric. So if this foot lifts up, things will slide through it easier. Okay, so for me, that's the one thing that I have changed on this, and pretty much every other machine I've sewn on is I'll change the presser foot pressure. Okay, all right, there we go. There's the bottom band. Okay, let's give it a try, you guys. See what happens. Okay. Sorry, I was like, what's on me? Oh, it's a microphone. That thing. Sorry, I'm like a little cuddle belly. Okay. All right. So there we go. So now I've got my little pockets. Where are they? Here are my pockets. Okay. My little bottom hem. Turned out just fine. All right. Can see the hem. Works out fine, right? Does it look all right? Does it look like I cheated? Because that's basically what I just did, is I just cheated, didn't actually hem it. So now, once you've gotten it to this point, then you have to figure out where to put the belt on. So everybody sort of is a little bit different on where they want the belt. I tried it on earlier and made a mark for where I want to put the belt. So we're going to put a belt loop on and then do the belt. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, you could actually do it without a belt if you wanted to. You could also do the belt and not the loops. Okay, so that's totally optional, is to not do the loops at all.
Is that the short length or the medium?
That is the short length. Yeah, that is the short length. The medium length came about knees. Okay, okay. So belt loops, we're gonna get those ready first, and then we'll do the belt. So the belt loops, I did them differently. Surprise. Than the pattern. Like every time, like really, I had to just mess with things. So these, now I can't even remember what I cut it. 3 inches, 2.5 inches. 2.5 inches is what I cut this. I'll cut another one so we can do that. Okay, I think it's 5 inches long. Let's see, yeah, 5 inches long. I think I wanted it 2.5, right? Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna give that a shot. Okay, so it's just my rotary cutter, just flip right off. Okay. Mine also has a little blip. Blade needs to be replaced. Okay. Okay, so this stuff, the Luxe Cuddle is definitely a shedder, just so you know. So, so for those of you who are winning it, get your vacuum cleaner ready. So what I did here is I just folded this in half this way and hemmed it, okay? And not even hemmed it, I just sewed a seam here with a big zigzag is all I did. We're gonna use this for the belt loop. This is just gonna go in the back, okay? Technically, you should be sewing this right sides together, doing a little seam, and then turning it inside out. For me, it's so thick that it becomes a little bit of a hassle to do it that way, and I try to do things so that they're not quite as difficult. So all we're going to do is we're just going to let that be an exposed seam on the back of the loop. Totally fine. This will be the front of the loop. This is all you'll ever see. It looks totally fine. This will be much easier to sew. Okay, so I'm just going to sew a little zigzag right down the side. Okay, and the zigzag I did before was just a wide zigzag, and then I did it at 3.5 length. Okay, so it's just a nice big zigzag, basically to go right over the edge. Okay, so I'm kind of blind sewing, but I know where that edge is for the most part. Okay, so now I've made myself another little tube. Okay, so this is going to be the same way. It'll flatten up like this. That's my back seam. Okay, just a super easy way of doing it. There's lots of things that you can do with exposed edges because it's a knit and doesn't fray. You could totally take your little stiletto and fluff that up and really bring the stitches out, and you'd never see the zigzags either. Okay. All right. So on my robe, I put my mark here that's about where I want my my belt to be. Okay. So if I want my belt to be here, I'm just going to go a thumb width up. Okay. And I'm going to put my pin through here a little bit funky, okay? So you can see I kind of wove it through, okay? And that way, when I bring it around to this side, I have a little bit more that I could feel. All right, so over here I can feel it because there's like, can you see it? No, it's just, yeah, it's just like you can't see anything, but I can feel that in there. So what I'm gonna do is this is my belt loop, and I want the nap to go the same direction. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it now. So what I'm doing is I'm going to line this up. I'm going to get that smashed flat again. Okay, and I'm going to line this seam up with the seam that's in here. Okay, so much of this is just by feel. I can feel, here's my pin going across this way, and here's my seam going this way. So I'm going to stick this right here. And I'm going to pin it in place. Okay, so while some of this seems like it's a little extra hard, it's also extra forgiving. So if it's not in the perfectly right spot, it's going to be fine. Whereas when you're working with some of the other fabrics, it can be a little bit trickier. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to hem or seam this in place. So I'm going to stitch across here a couple of times because I want this to hold on really tight. Okay.
You took that pin, that marker pin out.
Yes.
Just now.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, because I don't want to sew over it. So I want to get that out of the way. Okay. A lot of pins today. All right, so now I'm going to just bring this over. Get this nice and flat to where I have my pins. I feel like I lost a pin there. Okay, so I am going to actually zigzag this across the bottom just because I want to make it a little bit flatter and hold nicely. Okay, so I'm going to zigzag across, and I'm going to back stitch. Okay, I'm just sort of eyeballing as to where it needs to be. Okay, I'm going to cut that. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this over. Okay, give myself a little bit of a space in here for my belt to go, and then I'm going to pin this here. Okay, because I cut this with a rotary, it's a hard edge, and that's really okay at this point because I want to see that edge so that I can get it smashed down real flat. Okay, because I need that to hold on really nicely. So this one, I'm just going to do the same thing, stitch all the way across, my back stitch, stitch all the way across again. Okay, do a little knotting stitch there. Come on. And put my thread. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to clip my thread. Okay, so this, not the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. But if I take my stiletto, which I can't find because it's around here somewhere, I can just flip the things that I just did right over that zigzag and it's totally hidden. Okay, so ta-da, there it is, stuck in there. Ta-da! All right, so let's do the other side. All right, pretty darn easy. So even though it's a little bit funky because of all the fluff, it really hides anything and everything in that fluff. Okay, so I had my thing and I used my thumb as a measurement, if you remember correctly. So I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, I'm going to get this to kind of wind its way through so that then I can feel it from the other side. Okay, same deal. Okay, so then if I stick my hand in here, I can feel. Here's the pin. I've got the seam open. I can feel it here. You can see it just a tiny bit. There it is. Okay, and I want the nap to go this direction. So I'm going to fold this in half. Okay, with my seam along the back. Get it so that this goes right above that pin and pin it down again. Okay, I'm going to just do the same thing. All right, okay, one more time. Okay, and you'll notice that when I'm putting it in, I put it into the machine and I don't put it straight across from here. I try to go for the thinnest spot, which is this part here. Okay, I'll come up here. Again, we're keeping everything up on the table. I'm going to try to keep that smooth underneath. I want the seam allowance to be open if I can. Okay. So at this point, where's my stiletto? There it is. At this point, if you have used your stiletto enough, you can sort of feel where edges are, and that's how I can tell where my edge is, as I can sort of just feel it. Okay. I want those pins to come out. All right. So much fluff. Okay. Okay, so I can tell I just came off the edge. So I'm gonna go back, do it again. Okay, if I zigzag a little extra, it's fine. It'll just fluff out of the stitches. It's all good. Okay, so we'll do that. I'm gonna do the same thing that I did before, where I'm gonna flip this down. Okay, and once I've gotten into that position, that back seam is just gonna stay right in the middle, and it's not gonna hassle me again. So I lay it flat, give it a little bit of space. And I'm going to pin it again. Okay. So at this point, I'm like trying to feel if that's open under there. Yeah, it still is. Okay. That I just wanted, like, I'd like to keep it open. If it ends up, you know, getting shoved one way or the other, it's okay. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Stitch across, stitch back, stitch across, do a little locking stitch. Okay. Cut my thread. All right. Get stuck in the machine. Okay, so now I'm over here. I'm going to take off my little thread from where I started. Okay, do the same thing. We're just going to fluff up some stitches. Okay, now my belt loop is on there. Totally fine. Okay, so now I got a belt loop, got a robe. That whole thing is finished. Now I just have to do the belt. Okay, so the belt, you could do a couple of different ways. And I thought about this. So there's the nicer way. What time is it? We can show you the nicer way too. Or there's the cheap and easy way. Okay, so this is the same. And I kind of want to use this as a belt. But the idea of trying to turn this, like stitching this and then turning this inside out, just sounds like not a lot of fun to me. But the thing that I realize is that if you stretch this stuff, it curls on itself. So I can sew these together, which is what I'm going to do real quick. And then we just make a little belt, just like that. Okay, so I'm just going to sew these in a little zigzag. You can stay there. I'm going to sew these in a zigzag. And then that will be the fastest belt you've ever made. Okay. The thing with this, as I'll show you in a second, is that you'll sometimes see the back. The backing is so soft, it doesn't matter. And honestly, I like the look of this better than I like the look of the fluffy stuff for the belt. Come on, little guy. Okay, so I'm just going to zigzag across that. Ta-da. Okay, so now I've got that seamed. It's one big thing. I can fluff these out. Okay, pull that out just a little bit. Come on. Okay, and then what we do is we just stretch it. And we pull off all the little bits of cuddles. You remember I told you if you stretch it, it'll start to curl on itself, which sometimes it's the exact opposite of what you want, and then sometimes it's the exact thing that you want. Okay. Ta-da. Okay, so now this could totally get fed through there and become the belt for the robe. Ta-da. Okay, super easy. The real way you want to do it, which is absolutely how I would do it for a kid. I'd be like, there you go, done. We're going to do a nicer one. So I cut it the length that I had of fabric then I had to seam it. So the seam in it is what we'll show, and that I don't particularly love, but it's not terrible, but it will always just show a little bit. Okay, so that's the seam that's in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this in half this way, and we're going to stitch down the side, turn it inside out, and make a belt out of this. Okay. So the only trick with making this belt was 60 by 80, or 6 inches by 80 inches, I think. The only trick with this is leaving a spot that you can turn it inside out. Okay, so this one, let's try the pinning and clipping, because this is just a lot of straight, and it's straight on the up and down grain. Okay, so it's not stretchy. So it should sew pretty darn easily. And then I'm just going to leave a spot that I can turn it inside out. And then I'll hand stitch that shut, and then the belt will be done. Okay. More clips, there we go. All right, so over here, we're going to get past the middle, or not, it's not really the middle. We're going to get past that a little bit. And then I'm going to leave a spot where I can have the hole to turn it. Okay. You could do one end, leave that, and then turn it through the end. But I like to leave a hole in the side somewhere. Okay, so this would be a place too that you could do the stitching across here, the like pre-stitching, so that it would fold really nicely. Okay, actually let's just do it. What I want to do is make a mark on either side. This will take me just a minute, and it will make that side fold in a lot nicer. Okay, so this is just going to be a straight stitch. I'm going to do it from the back so I can see it really well. Okay, so just a straight stitch. I'm going to do it a 1/2 inch.
It's only a single layer.
It's just a single layer. Yep. Yep, because I'm just basically stitching some first so that I know where to hand sew it later. And it'll come in really handy because it will actually make it fold in right there super easily. Okay. And because this is so extra fluffy, that's what I was thinking is like, nah, if I do this, it'll actually be much more helpful because this is so fluffy. So some of the other ones I wouldn't necessarily do, like the Sherpa you saw when I did the bottom. I wasn't going to stitch that first because the Sherpa is just easy enough to fold it in and sew it. But this one has a little bit of extra. Okay, so there are my 2 seams. So now I'm going to mark with some pins to say that this is where I want to start and stop my sewing. Okay, so I'm going to leave that little gap in there. Okay, so now I'm just going to pin and clip my way down along the whole edge. All right. So the other way that you can do this is you can also fold it over. Depends on what it is. We've done that with some other ones where you would fold it like this, and then you can top stitch it right down here. Okay, with this one I feel like the top stitching on it is not very pretty. So if you did it with regular Cuddle, it would look fine. Even on like a Luxe, like the Luxe hide, you'll be able to hide the stitches in there pretty darn well, and it'll be okay. We've done it on the Cuddle Spa, which we don't do anymore, but on some of these, especially the Luxe, the Frost and the Shag ones, the ones that are longer, the nap is so long that it ends up holding it down in a kind of a funky way that's sometimes a little harder to make it come back. So the top stitching isn't my favorite, which is why we did the hem the cheap and easy way. Yeah. Okay, super, just chop it off, you'll be fine. Please don't tell Nancy Seaman I said that. Sorry. This is not real apparel sewing. It's just an easier way of doing things, and sometimes we can do things in a little bit funky way because it's Cuddle. And it will do things. So you can see that this one worked really nicely because it's on the lengthwise grain. So this is my selvage right here. And it won't stretch or get out of place very easily at all because that it's on that grain, which doesn't stretch at all. Okay, nothing. So it makes it easier to sew, makes it easy to pin. So if you keep that in mind, sometimes you can use that to your benefit. All right. So I'm going to start over here. I'm going to sew up to the spot that we marked, take a gap, and go the rest of the way. All right. Okay. So I'm going to do this as well with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, straight stitch. I'm going to pop it to a 3 stitch length. Okay, and just like always, the tail is all the way on the table. We're just going to sew down. Okay. So at the corners, it's helpful sometimes if you do a 45 degree, don't just pivot. Makes the corners turn a little bit nicer. I'll show you on the other corner too. Okay, and you can see this wants to just sew super easily, which is great. So I just keep working it around to the front, give me a little bit more. But I'm going to keep the bulk of it over there just so it doesn't pull forward at all. Okay. Okay. that little seam allowance that I had to do. Okay, and then we're coming up to my 2 pins, which is my stopping line. Okay, so I'm going to get it to go right up to that seam that I sewed. And pivot and sew off. Okay, if you've done any of the blankets or anything like this, this is familiar, this way of doing this gap. Okay, where we do these little L's and it helps strengthen it. Okay, pivot. And we keep on going. All right. It's nice when it sews so easily. Just press it up. Just keep chugging along. So different than when we were doing the elephant, and I could do, you know, 12 stitches at a time before I had to like take a pin out and move things. Okay, so now we're getting up to the corner. So I'm gonna do that same thing where I do a little 45 stitch, just one little stitch, and then come across. Okay. Try it on a shirt collar sometime if you're making apparel. It makes the corners turn much easier. Okay. So now I'm going to whack off these corners. I'm going to clip the corners. You don't have to, but I'm going to because this is nice and thick right there. Okay, so I'm just going to cut out some of the bulk on both of the corners. Okay.
There's no reason to remove the selvage edge at all.
No, no, you can see, where is it that it's going to show? So yeah, here's the selvage edge, but all the like sort of weirdish kind of fabric part of it is over there, and it doesn't actually look really any different. But I got it all in the seam allowance, so it won't make any difference. Yeah, and it's different than with quilting cotton. Quilting cotton, you always need to take the selvages off, and these you do not. In fact, I avoid it often. Okay. So now take the other end of my stiletto with the little flat end, and I'm going to work this, see if I can get this to come through. Find where was my hole again. There it is. Okay. Tell you half the battle sometimes is finding that place where it's supposed to come out. Okay. All right, so there's the corner. Take my stiletto out here. It's all nice and shoved on there. Okay. Ta-da. Okay, so there's the one end. Now I can take this and I can use that stiletto the same way. Pop that corner out. Okay. Pop that up. And then we're going to do the same thing we always do. Pull all those stitches right out of the seam. Okay. And then all of a sudden your end looks totally fine again. Okay. So you could take some time and get those all out if you want to. Okay, finish that later, but look at how much nicer that looks. Already so much better. Okay, so there's an end. Now we'll flip the other end. Throw my trash away. Okay, so the same thing. I'm just going to get it started and shove my thumb down in there just a little bit, and then I can use the other end of my stiletto and just push it on. I'm just holding on to that little metal part. Be really careful you don't accidentally stab yourself with it. Not that I've ever done that today. Yeah. Happens a few times. All right, so we're getting there. I can see it's coming. Okay, so I just don't want to lose my stiletto in there. The other thing you can use is this is totally the time you can use your chopstick, and sometimes I'll use my 1/4 inch ruler, whatever you have that's long enough to get in there. Okay, same idea. Now we're going to turn it and flip this out. Okay, so what I want you to notice is the difference in that end. So this is when I just popped it out. That's what it looked like. Okay, and the other end looked completely different, right? I had to pull out all of those stitches, and that's because of which way the nap is going. So this nap, we talked about this, and I'll show you just a little bit on the rope. So this nap right here is actually coming from the inside, from the seam allowance right up here. That's what these little short guys are. is the inside seam allowances. So when I showed you on the shoulder yesterday, let me find it on here. So on this one, we have the same thing that happens, that these little guys that stand straight up right here, those are from the inside, okay? Because now if I look on this side, you can see that all of those fibers have been pulled to the other side. Okay, so if you don't want it to do that, you just have to pull them out from this side. Okay, and then it makes them not so sticky uppy right there. Sticky uppy, that's a real word, isn't it? Okay, this, if you want to leave it so that they are tucked in there, it makes zero difference at all. Okay, so with this, what I would probably do, this is probably what I'll do, is I will actually stitch along here and then cut all these fibers off. So that's my personal way that I do it, because I don't like them sticking out there, but they are absolutely not in the way. But that's the difference. So that was why I pulled them out here, and normally we pull them out from this side and pull them out, but it's not that they were stuck in this side, they're stuck from the other side. Okay, this belt loop was a really good example of it, because this is where the nap is coming this direction, so it's coming out from the seam allowance. This one, it was getting tucked into the seam allowance, okay, because the nap is going that direction. Okay, did that make sense? Hope that cleared up some things. There, a couple people asked about it yesterday, so that's where that's at. Okay, so now the belt has a hole in it somewhere. We're going to see if we can feel it. So all of this has to get taken out too. So I'll, watching a movie tonight, I'll sit here and pull these out. Okay, and then it'll make that whole edge nice and fluffy and not be pulled in at all. But right here is where we did those little pre-stitches. Okay, it's right there. So I can, like this. It just wants to fold right on those stitching lines. And I can pin this. Okay, what did I do with my needle? Do you see it? Me either. I'm barefoot in the studio and there's a missing needle. We're in trouble. Okay.
All right, so that brings up something. Somebody asked earlier, and they noticed that you stand while you sew.
Yes.
You don't sit very often.
It's true.
And apparently you're barefoot.
I am. I am barefoot. A lot of us like to sew without shoes on. That's pretty common. I think there's a lot of us who are like, we take the shoe off so you can feel the pedal better. You have more control. I sew standing up so that we can move in between a lot easier. Truth is, I would like my machine up about 6 inches and it would make it a lot easier for me. But standing up and sewing is actually really good for your back too, because when we're sitting and we're sewing, we tend to do this a lot, which is really bad for our back. If we're standing up and doing it, it's a little bit better for your back. I also find it much easier to go in between. I've had desks, I have them downstairs too, that are a little bit, I think they're a little bit higher downstairs, but yeah, I've been probably standing to sew for the last few years. Yeah, and I prefer it a lot because it keeps me more mobile and I'm not just, stuck in one place. And the back thing is a real issue. I'm sure y'all understand that.
All right, we just started the Barefoot Sewists Club.
Okay, great. I know, there's a bunch of us. We really do. We sew with our bare feet. Yeah, and if you've ever tried to sew with high heels when you're like a barefoot sewer, I remember doing that once before. Like I was going out and I had 15 minutes, so I had to sew something, I had to finish whatever up. And I remember trying to sew in heels, and I was like, but where's my foot? It was very weird. Okay, so I'm going to sew this up later because I can't find my needle. It's here somewhere. We're going to pretend it's sewn. And I'm going to stick it in here. Okay, and if this, depending on the different fabrics, you could zigzag that shut. I'm going to hand sew it because I think it'll look much nicer. Okay, I'm going to see if my loops hold up. Okay, so feed that through. The other thing you can do that I've seen in other robes is just the one hook in the back. You can also do them so that they're in the side before you sew it shut, before you sew your side seam shut. Okay, but let's see, I think we have a robe. I think we have it. I'm going to go back to bed after this, you guys. Ta-da! Look at that. Did it work? Do I look like I'm ready for bed? It's perfect. My little my little pockets here.
You look like you're pretending it's not 100 degrees outside.
Yeah. But it is super comfy, so you would actually, you know, like really tie these. It's interesting. I don't know if you guys can see like the difference in the tone depending on how the belt. I can see it the most of where the gray, I can see the gray in it a lot more. So anyway, so there we go. Super comfy, super easy. This is the shorter version, okay? Totally goes to about mid-thigh on me.
See if I can get around
Okay.
to the side a little bit.
So it goes about mid-thigh on me. Pockets are great, okay? Super easy. So let's talk about the other two versions that I did and the difference. So let me try on the, I'll try on the embrace one so you can see the length on that one. Okay, I'm pretty sure this was the long one. Yeah. So much fuzz on me. I did cut it about an inch shorter because I ended up mismeasuring something, but yeah. So this one is much longer. So you can see the other one went here. This is much longer. This is the longer version. This is the embrace version. Okay, so let me talk about some of the things that we did with this that's different. Okay, so this one I did entirely on the serger. I did the facing the exact same way. So this one, the band here and then the body of it, they're just raw right now. If I wanted to finish this up, I could go ahead and serge it, or I could zigzag that. It's totally fine to leave it like this. Not any big deal. Okay. With this, I did it the same way. I folded it in half and then I serged these together. I did a 4-thread overlock and just stitched it all together at one time, and then I pressed it over. Okay. So that's how I did that. This is the way that the band is presented in the pattern, is that I sewed the band onto the bodice, or the front, and then I turned the whole thing up and hemmed all the way around. Okay. So that's an easy way to do a hem, and it worked really well with the embrace because the embrace is so thin. It was totally fine. I did have to do a little extra stitching at the corner of the sleeve and the bodice. So on this part I had to do a little extra stitching, maybe not on this side. Let me check the other side to catch it because I had missed the corner slightly. So I had to come back over and fix it. Yeah, there it is. So I added in just a little piece of interfacing and stitched over it again to catch that. Okay, so when you're doing it, if I were to suggest doing it, that's the part that I would actually probably sew. I would sew that seam first and then I would serge it. So that's what I would do differently from what I did. Okay, but otherwise the entire thing was done on the serger and super easy. And like I said, I think it took me an hour and a half total to do the whole thing, which was great. This would be a fun one. If I'd had the time, what I was hoping to do was for this band, you could do a lot of fun embroidery on this and do a whole big embroidered piece down the front. Would be lovely. Okay. I didn't do pockets on this one. I did pockets on the other two. I didn't do it on this one. I'm going to show you just a little something. Okay. So we were talking about how you would do pockets on here. And what I would do is when you're sewing this, so this is, we're going to pretend that this is our side seam. Okay. So we're putting the pocket in. Okay, and I would sew this. I didn't transfer my markings because I'm really good at that. So let's pretend my markings are here and here. Okay, so that's where my markings were. So when I sew that, what I'm going to do, and this is what I do when I put things in, when I put pockets into embrace, okay, is I take a little bit of sew-in interfacing. I take just a little square. I put it over that, and I sew it in. And I would do that when I do this first seam. So when I do this first seam that I sew from here to here and I sew it to the side, I would sew these in place. So that adds strength to it. When I do the other, I would add it to this side so that when I do the curve and come around, I would have it on both sides. Okay, so what you want is that you want that added extra bit of interfacing, because what happens is the interfacing won't tear like the fabric will, and the fabric won't actually tear, it just sort of opens up. So it's one of the things that I found when working with the embrace, is that if I want something to be longer wearing, if I seam it first and then I serge it, it lasts longer. If I do pockets or anything where it's going to get some extra stress and I put a little bit of interfacing at that stress point, it works much better. Okay, so the same thing you could do, I found that out when I made a bathing suit cover up and then it got wet and all of this, the shoulder seams stretched open because of the weight of the water on it. And so then I tried a different way, and I actually put a little tiny piece of what's it called? Sew keys tape, like the it's just a little interfacing sort of tape that you can put in there. I put that into the shoulder seams and then it didn't stretch at all. Okay, so there are certain things like that that it can, so for a robe, I would probably want to do that, especially if I were going to make it into a pool robe. I would do an extra row of stitching or do that extra added interfacing. Okay, so I hope that made sense. Just adding those into the stress points, that's really the key. So the same thing if you were to do a buttonhole in embrace. So if you were to make like a shirt or something and you wanted to do buttonholes in it, make sure that you put some interfacing behind that. My personal favorite is the sew-in interfacing, because it doesn't have to attach to it and change the way that the embrace moves and the way that it acts as its own like soft, yummy thing. Okay, the sew-in interfacing will change the way that it behaves. I feel like there was one other thing. Oh, the Terry one. Okay, and if you have any questions, ask him now. Okay, so the Terry one, this is the one that I did the bands like it says in the pattern. So in the pattern, you're supposed to sew the band onto the sleeve and then you flip it over and then you top stitch it. So what I did was I serged all of these edges, okay, first, then I sewed it on, and then I brought this over and brought it past the seam, and then I top stitched it from this side right in the ditch. Okay. Okay, so that's what I did there. So this is my raw edge here, which is, and this is worked the same way here. Okay, so this is my raw edge. What's the serged edge? But I brought it over and tucked the seam allowance in there. So it's like we did the sleeves yesterday, and that worked out okay on the sleeves. What I found with this was a long way to go, and it ended up getting off, and I had to take out a few places that it puckered because it was such a long amount that it was easy for it to get sort of pushed aside. So anyway, I found it easier, definitely, doing it this way. And so if I were to do this again, I would do it the same way and then serge this edge is what I would do. Okay, with the Cuddle one, it's so soft and it's so yummy. I don't even care if the seam allowances show, and it's just more softness on the inside. But that's what I did differently with this one. Trying to think if there was something else I did differently, and I don't think so. I think that was the bulk of it. The bottom of here, I folded these under and then I top stitched it. I'm so bad about leaving all of my tails. So I hemmed this and then I pulled this over and then I just top stitched it along the bottom because I wanted to see about doing it a different way. But I actually don't mind the way that it's done on the embrace one. So the embrace where it flips up and the hem goes all the way across, that looks fine too. So that's the two ways of doing it there. Unless you're doing it with the Cuddle and then it's just leave it raw. Okay, so those are the 3 different ways that we did the hem and the band for the different fabrics. Okay, so I think it's kind of interesting because it's really not going to be exactly the same way for every project because the fabrics all act a little bit differently, so you kind of have to manipulate them as to what you want. So did we get any more questions in there? We're good? Okay, I just want to make sure I got everybody's questions. I tried to take them down from yesterday when people asked. So does this go into the finished samples pile? Ugh. All the robes.
I'm not going to pan over there and show you what that pile looks like. Not doing it.
You could just imagine. It'll be my job this week to clean that up. It's been some samples, let me tell you. So next week we'll be back. Actually, I'm going to take at least one of those robes downstairs into my bedroom. So next week we are back. Next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday we are back, and we are doing the Cuddle Kids Camp. So we'll be doing these 3 projects. We'll be doing the, we're going to do the Pop-Tart bag actually, and then we're going to do the unicorn, and then we're going to do one of these pillows. And since they are mood pillows, I'm kind of just going to wait and see what my mood is. It might end up being this guy up here, might not. But they have lots of variations on what you can do. It's a super fun project. I'm really looking forward to it. And this will be next week. So we're going to do a different project every day. It'll be a little bit different format in that I'm not going to sew through everything. We're going to talk about all the different things you need, bring the kids along. We're going to sew these projects, introduce them to sewing with Cuddle and how much fun it is and how easy it actually is. And then they'll walk away with 3 different projects if they join us every day. So I hope that you'll be back. Make sure that you like us on Facebook. If you are interested in joining the I Love Cuddle group, you can find us on Facebook. We have, it's a big group now. It's a lot of us are there, a couple hundred of us at least. Anyway, who are all Cuddle fans. So we'll talk about how to sew different projects with it, different blankets, quilts, stuffed animals. We show off the things that we make. It's great. So if you have not joined us there, join the I Love Cuddle Fabric page. And you can also find these videos on Instagram and YouTube later. So lots and lots of things. Oh, and then we probably have a winner. Oh, we do. Look at that. Yay. So the winner today is Stephanie O from Springfield, Virginia. So congratulations. You will win a kit to get the pattern as well as all of the fabric that you need to make your own robe. And if you'll message us, you can message us on the Shannon Fabrics page and let me know whether you want to do it with the fabrics that I did for the Cuddle robe or if you want to do it with the Terry or the Embrace. I'm happy to send you any of those too. Okay, if you have any other questions, leave them for me. If not, come back next week for our Cuddle Kids Camp. And until then, happy sewing.